How's it going, everyone? Welcome, Eulier Gonzalez here. And today we're going to make a quick recap of this course of React, which is the joy of React, and make a quick recap of another course, which is also taught by Josh Combinators. When it comes to now look at the Java, or to learn the CSS from a JavaScript perspective, right? So in that particular course, which is the CSS for JavaScript developers, right? We went through understand now the several models, which is 10 models. First thing first is by exploring is the introduction of this course to look at the different papers of how people learn stuff and how now the science actually is uh, looking at ways to improve that, whether it's blocking or interleaving, if that works for you, which is great. The other is this error correction. So far, I think that both of these approach actually have helped me vastly to first understand the relationship of all of this. Second is to de- describe in the most time effect possible way is this stuff known as the CSS or the JavaScript or any topic in general. And especially when you need to run something or you need to actually show what you do or how you do that. Anytime that you make an error is an invitation for you to reinforce that. In other words, recognize that there is an error, understand why that error happened, and then correct yourself. Right? This is part of the neuroplasticity that a lot of developers or even neuroscientists actually are talking about. So this is very interesting because software engineering it involves not only is the design of systems, all right, or the programming, but also is in other areas that are relevant to your life, whether it's the physical areas like fighting, the MMA, that kind of stuff, as well as the cognitive aspect of this, which is how do you learn, how you can improve your learning, how you can structure your life, how you can now bring order to the chaos of your life, how do you design your life as well, which is a topic that is often overlooked a lot because we are on the on our daily life, and there's a lot of things throwing out self. There's a lot of things throwing out to ourselves, and it is quite hard to actually take a break, hit the brake, chill, relax, and then design and organize your life. Now, so this is interesting because this will also help you to understand and to push forward where are you going to move in the next perhaps quarter, all right? So you can now dedicate time and energy to things that really matter for you, whether it's professionally as well as in the social aspect or personal life. I think that's a good way to actually put things in perspective. Now, with that, to briefly describe is this CSS for JavaScript developer course, and then finally jump into the joy of React to look at these several models. Uh, First is to develop these social skills that are needed when it comes to describe is different structure or different languages and tools, in our case CSS and then JavaScript. So that's what I'm gonna do quickly and then move on to what we really care, which is React. Now we also look at the model for the model zero, the fundamentals is to look at the introduction that ambient docs describe, and in there you're gonna see is what are the things that or what is CSS, what CSS actually is, how CSS works behind the scenes, and some important topics, the overview of all of this, which is how do you add styles to your document, whether it's external or internal or inline. How do you now select elements in the DOM and then you apply certain rules to that, whether it's for per tab, per class, per attribute, as well as the combinators that allow you to select multiple of them, as well as the several rules that you can apply per state. So in other words, whether it's on hover or on focus, so on and so forth. And also the additional function that CSS provide, that is, well, mathematical functions or color functions, transition, as well as transform, so rotate is another one, if I recall that right. So cal is another one. Transform functions such as rotate, yes. So cal functions, so rotate, background image, color function, as well as the add rules, which is the way how you can specify how CSS is going to behave, and therefore how it is going to, or it provide instructions of how CSS should behave, such as the media query, and import, and the keyframe, and the layer, and the view transition, as well as the shorthand property for formats that padding, margin, and border actually follows. And last but not least is a comment. So, because this is the introduction of CSS, and what is relevant for 2025 is first understand the anatomy of a CSS, which is the rule. All right, what is this rule is made of, what a rule is, which is an entire rule with the selector as well as the declarations. What is a selector, how you can identify a selector, what is a declaration, which is this is the combination between a property and the value. What is a property, what is a value, what is the unit of a value that can be, all right? And then look at the most common tools in the language, that despite that all of this has been taken care for a JavaScript library for us, or for modern tooling, right? There's some nifty ones that are still relevant for our job. One of them is media, to understand what are the several rules that we want to apply to according to our media, which is still relevant for a lot of websites, that kind of stuff. The other is now the selectors, whether it's per tag or class, and what are the most common selectors that we can use, all right? Whether it's the pseudo-element or the pseudo-class. So for pseudo-class, we have now hover, which is now internally is controlling the state of this animation, when it's going to happen. So we just only care about provide a set of instruction when that happens. We are not handling any of this state-based, such as state management, like Vue or Wikipedia or Redux, that kind of stuff. You just only care about is when that happens, and when that happens, I want you to do this, which is exactly what this pseudo-class and pseudo-elements are doing. So common pseudo-classes are hover, and then you have focus. Why focus is important? If hover is something that is when you hope past the element for that, most common cases like buttons and anchor tags. But focus is important because if you want to provide now accessibility to your users, all right, you must follow the WCAG, which is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. that follow this for principle. Poor to me is that's a very bad marketing. But in any case, in marketing there is no bad marketing or good marketing, just marketing, right? So poor stands for perceivable. If this is perceivable and there are certain rules that you must apply to that, if this is perceivable, the other is this operable in effect. Let's go to dive deep into this, let's go dive deep into this, for example, like this, in understanding all the docs, right? So first thing first is perceivable, all right, and this is now all of the rules that you must follow, all right, is a text alternative, time-based media, for example, audio only or video only, is adaptable. This is the stuff that you should follow for this, and they provide you some example of that, as well as different techniques that you can use, that advisory techniques, so on and so forth. The other is this operable? So can I have access to this? Is this operable or accessible? All right. For example, can I now navigate your website through my keyword? This is when focus kicks in. All right. And how focus is being used to provide now for any of these non-pointer accessibility tools or non-pointer devices such as screen readers, a way that allow now to navigate through your website. So if you're going to provide this product to a government, of course this is important, this is crucial to be. The other is now this is understandable. All right. Hey, is this readable? And you provide now input assistance. All right. Is this understandable? Is this readable? Is this predictable? On focus, this is what it comes to. The goal can be navigate more predictable. This is when focus is important for the understandable. Hey, is this predictable? Hey, can I use focus to navigate through your application? All right. That's when now focus kicks in. And the other is robust. Is that, hey, if this is compatible, all right, if this assistant technology can properly present page content, if this is compatible with this assistant technology. This is the reason why I'm making this quick recap of the WCAG, which is the Web Content Accessibility Tool, Accessibility Guidelines. Okay, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. I don't know if exactly the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. This is what I want to highlight. All right. They are informative, not part of the normative WAC standard. For more information, see about the W Understanding Docs, right? Again, they are informative. They are informative. But right now, not part of the normative WC standard. Again, this is to understand the docs. Most of this WCIC understanding docs is exactly as the name suggests, is to, as you walk through the guidelines, you're going to understand why we're doing the kind of stuff that we do, right? The structure of this document is to understand the intention and any advisory techniques for that. Understanding succession criteria involving the wording of WAC, intent of succession criteria, benefit and how this, so on and so forth. So Oracle Corporation, non-ESA, invite expert, DQ system, DQ system is actually .com. That's interesting. Paul Adams for DQ system. Interesting. Is a former accessibility evangelist. Okay. His focus is on mobile accessibility and modern web accessibility. For all of that. Which is good, right? Paul Beans registered Apple developer since 2011 and spent his free time creating iOS app and learning modern JavaScript development. So this is it. Exactly. It's not even loading. What the French? So it's actually loaded. Consulting in Austin, Texas, right? And he does all of the kind of stuff. Okay. It's pretty straightforward. His website. It's like nothing too fancy. Exactly. It's like nothing too fancy. But I don't think he even update that. You know what I mean? I don't think he even update that. CSV Health. He also worked as senior accessibility program manager, the UX accessibility lead in the Atlassian. Okay, mobile accessibility specialist. Also, he worked in the queue system for a lot of years. All right, that's interesting. That's very very interesting. CSV Health, principal accessibility solution engineer in iOS, native iOS accessibility engineer. That's interesting. That's interesting. Very very interesting. So yeah, that's pretty cool. Pretty cool. All right, cool. Now, to what we care is as we look at this and why we need to look at focus and why focus is important as a pseudo element, and then now the other pseudo elements like uh, uh, pseudo classes, my bad, right? Such as the hover, focus, and the nth child as well. All right, which and also check for type boxes, for check boxes. All right, and radio buttons for checks, first and last child, and first and first of the and first or last of type. The difference between is that if that actually matches the selector from the parent, is going to be applied. Uh, the first last or the first type actually check that property is now a first child or last child of this type, which is going to target that element properly. The other is more the interpretive. The other is more general, whereas now the type is more specific to that. And then we also talk about the pseudo selectors, pseudo elements, like the double column here, such as placeholder or before and after. And most of the time, this is used to the placeholder to indicate is what is the expected input that we want the user submit, and the before and after are used for decorative stuff, right? So far so good. Now, we also look at the combinators, the direct descendants, or all the childs, or the next sibling using the plus. Some of the color format as well, such as the keyword, which is for the occasional purpose, the Xcode to help us show now is the color in Xcode because it is hard to read. We use now RGB, or we have another method, which is RGB. But because anytime we want to now subtle colors here, then we prefer is the HSL, right? The hue, which now show you is the color palette in this ring like, right? The saturation, which is how gray out or full color is this, or how gray out or the intensity of the color. Okay, like this. Exactly how gray out or vibrant the color is, the saturation, and then you have the lightness, which indicate is the pure form of the color. 50% is the pure form, right? There are also some nuances in there which you can check and say, hey, if I want to get the pure color of yellow and blue, then actually doesn't look like that they are so vibrant. So yellow look like much more vibrant than blue. But the thing here is that it is mathematically proved that they are. So because the way how we perceive that is something that is not aligned to what might be expected, but mathematically it is true. Also, we look at the transparency and how can we deal transparency here using these functions, because after all, that's what it is. They are functions, so you can express this using the slash, where the first term indicates the color and the second indicate is the opacity. I didn't know about that. The other is the type of units like m, rands, percentage, and how percentage and rands, specifically rands. So m's are relative unit to the same font size of the current element. So it's gonna take a look at the font size of these current elements, and therefore it's going to be the unit m. Whereas the root m's is gonna take a look now at the HTML tag or the root element and look at the font size there. And another interesting topic is the percentage, which is usually used with width and height. And there's some query when it comes to percentage base, especially since it is used by height, by the height algorithm and the aspect ratio, something that I want to dig dive later on, as well as the typography, which is similar to color, which is a huge topic. So typography here, the fundamentals are the font families, which is a set of multiple character. For example, Roboto, you have now is 6 variants and 2 text formatting, which is you have now 12 character sets. So because these character sets, browsers use those by default. So for example, Times New Roman, Tahoma, that come from the OS. The thing here is, when you're developing an application or working with a client, they want to give their own imprint, their own branding. And here's where now web fonts kicks in, which is something that is provided by any other CDNs or any other servers. The most famous is the Google font. And how can we use that in our application? One most notorious example is that Airbnb is using the serial font size for that. I think that's something great and important to know, to acknowledge as well. And then we look at the type of text formatting. First is the bold, to indicate that this is something important. The italic is there's a lot of nonverbal communication when you are in a conversation with another. So Because of that, italic is used for describing the title of a book, of a movie, or to point out is foreign words, as well as the scientific terms such as Homo sapiens, so for example, use italic, or when you want us to get an extract or quotes from some paper or some external sources, okay? And I think this is important to understand because when you want to use now the M and the strong tag, it is important to know that screen reader are using that to give emphasis to the text. So the other is the underlined text. The main intent of this is for links, and then some style and semantic, which I mentioned before. The other is the alignment of this text, whether it's right, center, or left, and the text transformation, as well as the spacing. Important. Text transformation is that you can turn it into uppercase or some other alternative, and the text transformation as well as the alignment, as well as the spacing here, and that is how much space you want to, how much horizontal space you want between characters or between lines. So you have now letter spacing or line height. So here's when the WCAG comes and say, hey, at minimum, we want to, so for readability, we want the line height to be is 1.5 root element, or 1.5 the distance. So that's why we put there now is 2.5 at minimum here. So then we look some debugging tips for our use cases now, that you can add the color using now shift. So shift between colors, all right, between different color formats, all right, whether it's the HSL or RGB, so on and so forth. Firefox and Google now provide this hint to help you fix some issues, all right, which tells you that hey, width has no effect on this element since it has a display of inline. So try adding display inline block or display block. So when you add that, you can now take that in effect. So in other words, this is some useful hint. You need to know about the box model of the CSS, why everything in CSS is a box, all right? And with that mental model, which help you to be able to describe all of these different layouts, a more complex layout, we're gonna see that later. And the other is how to open the inspector. Pretty straightforward. Now, finally, do what we really care. Do what we really care. After half an hour to describe that, well, let's take a look at this introduction. So because React was designed to solve Facebook problems when writing and maintaining UI, and those problems are something that most companies now are starting to face, and that is the omnidirectional data flow. The other is when and why components re-render, as well as a grasping the mental model of UI as a functions of a state. Very important here is to understand that at the end of the day, React is telling you, or the mental model of this is this function. It will represent the UI that has a state. All right, that's the whole idea of React. Okay, it's a function that represent similar like numbers, the ASCII character. When you say, hey, this character or this code represent this character, where now here in React it say, hey, this function represent this user interface, And this function has internal state that you have to manage that. That's something. That's mind blowing, especially if you can describe that. Because, for example, frameworks like Vue, what they're saying is, no. I don't want to be responsible as developers to take care of this smaller user interface states. I want to delegate that to the framework so I can focus is on building is my functions, or aka my files, that represent is a user interface. All right, and therefore now I can compose is user interface. I can scale user interface. That is powerful to understand that. So we're going to interact with some exercise as well. So this course is describing here some of these exercises. I don't know why you do that. Okay. I don't know why you do that. I know why you do that. Yep. Yep. Okay, we're going to interact with some exercise like this and another one, as well as this, to understand that. I think that's a very interesting way to recap some also concepts, as well as some of the projects here. The Toast Playground, I really love about the word game, which might be silly to implement, but it's going to give you an idea what's going on. And this as well. So, good. Because now, let's get into this. Model 1 React Fundamentals. Okay. The magic of React. So the magic of React. Okay. The magic of React. This is interesting. In the early 2010, Facebook developers. So in the early 2010s, almost, holy moly, almost 15 years ago. Oh my god. Crap. Anyway, in the early 2010s, Facebook engineers had a problem. Thousands of people were complaining about phantom message. So thousands of people were complaining about phantom message. Phantom message. Exactly. Users will see a little one notification badge by the message icon. So users will see a little one notification badge by the message icon. Badge by the message icon, suggesting they had new message. Exactly. Suggesting they have new message. But when they click, there wouldn't be any new. There wouldn't be anything new. Oh, okay. But when they click, there weren't any message. Well, there won't be There wouldn't be. Okay. There wouldn't be. They wouldn't. They wouldn't. They wouldn't be anything new. They wouldn't be anything. Anything new. Okay. Just the same old message. Just the same old message. Okay. A little one notification. Like this. A little one notification. Badge with the message suggesting they have new message. Okay. But when they click, they wouldn't anything new. Just the same old message. At the time, the UI had 3 separate locations where message state was presented. Okay. At the time, the UI has 3 separate locations. The UI has separated Jesus. The UI has 3 separated locations where message state was present. When message state was present, whether it's the message drawer, the chat widget, and the main view. Okay. Interesting. Very, 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 very interesting. So the message, but again, the at the time the UI had 3 separate locations when message state was present. Okay. When message state was present on the message drawer here, the message navbar, the message drawer, this UI, the chat widget, as well as the chat or the main view. Okay. Users were getting phantom message because these 3 parts of the UI were powered by separate view. Users were getting this phantom message, because these 3 parts of the UI, because these 3 parts of the UI were powered by separate view, were powered by different views, and those views were getting out of sync, were powered by different view, and those views are powered by and those views are powered and those views are getting out of sync. Exactly. This might seem like a trivial problem to solve, but Facebook is tremendously complex app. So this might be seen like a trivial. Yeah, this might be seen like a trivial problem to solve. But Facebook is a tremendously complex app. But Facebook is a tremendously complex app with hundreds of developers across dozens of teams all collaborating. Exactly. So with hundreds of developers collaborating across different teams, or they call them Iceland, something like that. Adding new features, moving fast and breaking things. So adding new features, moving fast and breaking things. Again, if you're in the software, yes, you can do. But if you are in any other industry like the finance, or where now the risks are high, okay, so you have now the finance, the military, or the healthcare. You don't want to introduce any bug of that. Oh, definitely not. Every week, some new edge cases could crop up, leading to phantom message. It was like playing guacamole. Every time they fix a bug, a new one will pop up. Exactly. So imagine that every week, which is happening right now, every week, uh, some new edge cases will crop up. Some new edge cases will pop up, and leading to phantom message, leading to leading to phantom message. Exactly, leading to phantom message. So it was like playing guacamole. uh, it was like playing guacamole. I don't know how do you say that in Spanish. In Spanish, I know this is literally, but I don't think this is on the Spanish. Golpear al topo. Guacamole. ¿Cómo le diríamos en español? Guacamole. Golpea al topo. Pac, 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 pac. You know, guacamole. All right. Guacamole. So Jin Chen told about this story. So the team eventually solved this problem by migrating to an experimental new tool called React. So the team solved this problem by moving to an experimental tool called React. Ji Cheng can give you more detail about it. So Jin Chen can give you more details about it in this. So we're thinking this. All right. So the truly magical thing about React is that we don't have to worry about keeping our state held in JavaScript and our UI in the DOM in sync. Exactly. So the magic, which after all is not magic, it's just relying heavily on JavaScript. So the magic thing about React, is that we don't have to worry about keeping our state. Exactly. Is that we don't have to worry about keeping our state, the UI, in sync with the DOM. Or in sync. Okay. Held in JavaScript and our UI in sync. Exactly. So we don't have to worry about keeping our state in JavaScript and in sync the UI with the DOM. and our UI in the DOM. The live running environment that display the website. At the live running environment that display the website, we learn the DOM about in sync. And in sync. So our UI, exactly, our UI. So we don't have to worry about keeping our state and our UI. And our UI exactly, it's because it's this. So the magic thing about React is that we don't have to worry about keeping our state in JavaScript, and our UI in sync, and our UI with the DOM in sync, right? Because the mental model is, hey, I want to have now this function that represents a user interface where you put states on it. Okay. With React, we are describing what we want the UI to be based on the current application state. And React takes those descriptions and make it real. Exactly. So with React, we are describing exactly. So with React, we are describing what the UI, what we want the UI to look like. Okay. And what are the state based on the current application state? Based on the current application state. So those states are now managed by React. Okay. So I started building with React in 2015, and there you got it. I can honestly say that I never want to build dynamic web applications any other way. Once you got comfortable with React, it becomes such a powerful tool. Of course, we get it. So in my case, I started to develop. In my case, I started building with React in 2022. All right. As you can see a little later, in 2022, but in any case. So that's what the magic of React is all about, and it's important to understand that concept. So you are now describing is what the UI will look like based on the application state. Okay. So since our application state now is something small, which is the UI, all right, as the application state grows and grows and grows in complexity, and we want to now build is websites, all right, we can now delegate that to frameworks or JavaScript functions known as Redux, for example, or Shorthand, which behind the scenes is using now some of these functional concepts that we're going to use a lot. So about React 19, this course is still 100% relevant to software developers using React today. I generally do not believe you need to be concerned about this. To quickly summarize what was changed in React 19, I think there are three main buckets: minor improvement and tweaks, the stabilization of server component, and the introductions of action. There were also a bunch of under the hood change, but those only really affect frameworks, library, maintainer, so I have excluded them from this list. Let's look at each bucket in turn. Okay. Next 15 in Model 6 in this course will cover full stack React principle in the context of Next.js, the new app router, and Next.js recently released a new major version, which is 15, This release was largely about bumping React from 18 to 19, though there were also some breaking change. Okay, I'm pleased to share that this course has been fully updated to Next 15 in Model 6. All of the code has been updated, and note has been added that highlight recent change. Keep calm and carry on. Over the summer, I built a brand new version of my blog, Just Combinators. I used React 19 while it was still in beta because I want to learn all the new stuff. And honestly, React 19 feels exactly like React 18 most of the time. I was able to benefit from some of the quality of life improvement, and I have fun experimenting with actions, but the overwhelming majority of things were completely identical. As I mentioned above, the courses now highlight the things that have changed in React. Okay. Okay. But, but, exactly, about React 19. A word about React 19, right? Do, do, do. So there are minor tweaks here. I think there are three main buckets. There, there are three main buckets according to Joshua. Uh, Minor improvements, the stabilization of server components, and the introduction of actions. What the French toast? Okay. There you got it. And let's go over. So let's go over each one of them. All right. So minor improvement and tweaks. The React Native introduced a handful of quality of light change, tweaking things to be slightly more ergonomic. The joy of React has been updated to include this change. I have added notes throughout the course to highlight and explain changes in React 19. I have also updated the playgrounds and project to use React 19 as well, so you can experiment with these changes on this platform. These changes are all pretty minor, but I make sure that you won't miss any of them. So, in other words, it says that uh, introduce a handful of quality of life change. Like that. What the? Okay. Minor improvements and tweaks. Alright. To improve the ergonomic of this. We're gonna see that what that means. Stabilization of server components. Stabilization of server components. Server component is one of the two headlines featured for React Native, and good news, we already covered them in the joy of React. Okay. How that is possible? Well, several component was released in beta in React 18 and they have been marked as stable in React 19, but their public API hasn't changed a lot. So when it comes to particularly bleeding edge feature, this core is already 100% up to date. I don't think that a lot of people actually are using is now this, you know. Most teams are up to change that, and the introductions of actions, right? The introductions of actions, which is a new action API. In other headlines features of React 19, they offer an alternative way to work out with forms and perform mutations. Okay, exactly. So the new actions, and here we're gonna use the italic for this. The new action the new actions API is the other headline feature from React 19. All right. They offer an alternative way to work with forms and they offer an alternative way to work with forms and perform mutations. This is the biggest thing missing from Joy of React right now. We don't really cover actions at all. It is very possible that I'll some content in the future to fill this gap, but for at least now, I am in wait and see mode. I get it. I want to see if the community adopts them or not. And I think this is crucial, bro. I want to see if the community adopts or not. I have done some experiment with actions, and truthfully, it isn't clear to me that it's really an improvement over the existing alternative. I'll be watching to see whether companies start using that. When it becomes a thing, you need to know as a React developer. Exactly. Actions are supplemental. In this course, you learn how to work with form in the traditional way using control inputs. You might be wondering, isn't this a waste of time if actions are the future? Really? Here's the thing. Actions don't really replace control inputs. They supplement them. You still need to understand control inputs. Exactly. You still need to understand that. So this is this particular part. So I am in wait and see mode, bro. I am in wait and see mode for that. Actions are supplemental. Here's the thing. Actions don't really replace control inputs. They supplement them. You still need to understand the control input. I'll explain this in more depth when we get to that point in the course. But this is quite interesting here. Actions are supplemental. Warning. In this course we learn how to work with form the traditional way, using control inputs. You may wonder, isn't this a waste of time if actions are the future? Here's the thing. Actions really don't replace control inputs. They supplement them. You still need to understand control inputs. So the other is next 15. All right. In model 16, we're going to explain now the app router. I am quite familiar with this, because I have played a lot with features like that, especially with Nox and how you can do that. Why wouldn't you prefer to go with Nox and so on and so forth? So hello React. Yeah, I'm quite familiar with this. Yeah, I'm quite familiar with this. I am very quite familiar with this. You know, this is now the course in itself, which is the Hello React. The Hello React. Exactly. Which is now the piece of code, as well as the index.html. This is the JavaScript file, or you can see this is script file, script.js, and then you have now the index.html, which is this, and how you can import that. We're using is now this. So there are several ways of how you can render that, whether it is React for the DOM, React Native for mobile, iOS, Android, desktop, Windows, macOS application, and React 3 fibers. So we have now the core React package that renders into different specific platforms. Okay. They render into a specific platform. Platform specific. So you have now the React DOM. You also have now the React Native, which is something that I'm quite familiar with, and then you have now the React 3 fiber here, which is using for rendering a scene using WebLG and 3GS. So every platform has its own primitive. It's important. The set of built-in elements we use to create our own or UI on the web. The primitive are HTML elements like div, p, and button. By contrast, React Native doesn't have div. It has text, view, and pressable. And things get more wild with React 3 fibers, where the primitive are things like lights, geometries, materials, and cameras. Okay. Okay. Every render or every platform has its own primitive. Okay, similar like JavaScript. Okay, it is own primitive. Okay, the set of building elements we use to create our UI. Exactly. The set of elements we use to create our UI. For example, so on the web, I don't know what you make exactly. So really, you're gonna. But I don't know why you have all of that space, bro. It's quite annoying that you have that. It's too much space, bro. It's too much space. It's too much space. Too much space, bro. Oh my god, you know? Okay. That's okay. It's okay. No problem. So, this is the primitive here. Okay? So you have now on the web. So on the web, the primitives are like, exactly, primitive like, yeah, say the HTML or the div, you know, and then a button, and then an input. You know, this is the directive, but the primitive, so to speak, right? On the exactly on the on the mobile, because but if so, or React Native, or React Native, exactly. So React Native, in contrast, has text view and pressable, has things like text view and pressable, something that I have experience with. All right. Okay. And then in React 3 Fiber, in React 3 in React 3 fibers, we got wild things wild things like I want to use this example here. No, I'm perfect with this. We got wild things like camera. Exactly. We got wild things like we got wild things primitive like camera, lights, geometry, materials, and cameras. Okay, so lights, geometry, lights, geometries, material, lights, geometries, materials, and light. Interesting. All of these platforms will use the same core React framework which comes from the React package. When it comes to actually turning all the business logic into a user interface, we need to correct binding for our platform. This is actually a terrific thing because it means that the skills you build learning React can also be used to build mobile applications or 3D interface. Is that where your interest or your career takes you? You know? Exactly. So I don't know why you have that kind of... Why you have that, man? Stop. Oh my God, for real? Jesus. Stop doing that. Oh my God. Are you gonna continue to do that? Okay. Okay. What the French stuff? Exactly. So here we are now gonna take this. Exactly. This is actually terrific because things. Exactly. This is actually terrific because it means that the skills you build learning React can also be used to build mobile applications or 3D interface. If that's where your interests are, your career takes you. That's quite mind blowing, mind bending. That's interesting. Uh. Mm-hmm. And then you asking here this question, right? Here's another way to look. When you right click and view source, your view HTML a static document that describe what will be constructed. And the other is inspect elements. When you right click, inspect elements to open the element pane, you're interacting with the DOM. You change attribute and watch the UI update changes. When we use a tool like React, it works by interacting with the DOM via JavaScript. And it will create Exactly. So what the what the heck is it done anyway, right? And here we are describing is now the platforms, React and platforms renderers. You can call it like that. What the heck is a DOM anyway? All right. To use an analogy, HTML is a blueprint for a specific car, and the DOM is a car itself, zipping around the city. Here's another way to look at it. There. Exactly. So we use tools like React. It works by interacting with the DOM. Exactly. So this is interact. So React is interacting with the DOM for that, and allow us to create is the HTML, which is a structure like the car. All right. For that. Okay. Here when you create a React element, I know how to do that, but most of the time we don't do. Okay. So the property of this, exactly, this is when you're creating a React element. I am quite familiar to do that because I have done several of this in the past. I don't know what the format has that. You have too much format, man, that I don't like it. Your line. No lines. Exactly. So the first is the type of the elements, the property that we want to have in this element, and the other is the element contents here. The other is this. Oh, okay. Haha, it's because, okay. So the type of the element we want to create, and this is true for also other elements, right? But of course, we're not gonna use that. We're just using is the GSX syntax that help us in doing so. Okay. Later in this course, we'll learn about the key and ref. Look at this. If you console log the element, exactly. If you console log the element, you're gonna get this. Alright. That's interesting. If you console log the element, you're gonna get this object. Returns a React element here. Let me give you now the here's this. well as this. Okay, and it give you this. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. With the props, the key, and the ref. Render the application. Exactly, this is now render the application. It's going to render this application here. That's right. So render the application here, as well as the create a React element. And now understand this. This is the render the application. Okay. And then render the application, which is this. Jesus. Oh my God. And then render the application. Okay. And that render is when you call that using a query selector or a document get element by ID, to be more specific. It is the modern version of the document get element by ID if you're more familiar with that function. Query selector. This element will be our application container. When we render our application, it will create an append DOM element to this container with the React's DOM create function. And then we're gonna do that. Here they're using is now document query selector or document get element by ID for that. Exactly. So it didn't work because of this. Of the div. You go to index.html. This element will be our application container. And then you might have an build system that help you to do that. This element will be our application containers. Exactly.
So there's something a little bit strange, a little bit curious about the playground we've been looking at in this lesson. I have this chunk of JavaScript, and if I change something in it, it does appear to be working, right? I see the result of that change happening in the result pane in the DOM over here. But if I look at the HTML file, how exactly is this JavaScript actually running? Like, there isn't any sort of script tag that I would expect to see that would pull in that JavaScript that we need. How is it possible to not have that when we're working with React? Well, the thing to understand is that React is always used as part of a build system. The build system will take the files that we write and it processes them. It gets them ready to actually be used. And so if I inspect this over here, and by the way, all of the result panes in this course platform use an iframe. So we see it over here, there's an iframe that injects an entirely separate HTML file. And if I dig in to this HTML file, and I'll make it a bit bigger, we see that there's a bunch of stuff that gets added, including not one, but actually several script tags that include the code that we've written, as well as any dependencies like React and any other dependencies that React itself happens to need. The files that I write, the index.html, is an input file that is then processed into the final version. And so it takes all the JavaScript, it takes all the stuff that we could possibly need, and compiles it into a file that will actually run in the browser. Now, to be clear, I don't expect you to understand what all of these tags are or what they're doing here. The important thing to understand for now is that what we're actually working with is not the full picture. All these files will get processed in some way. And so if you're wondering if something seems like magic, that it seems to be violating the rules of the web, you're coming to this from maybe a jQuery background, a PHP background. If you haven't worked with other JS frameworks before, this probably seems wildly over-engineered. Why wouldn't we stick with the tried and true method of adding script tags for the dependencies and then for the code that we actually want to run and keep our HTML files, right? Be able to add React to our
Exactly, the tools of a trade. All the things that you need to know for that, because here we are using is that. Okay.
So there's something a little different. If you haven't worked with other JS frameworks before, this probably seems wildly over-engineered to introduce quality of life things. Like, because we have this process, we can transform the modern JavaScript that we're writing. We can take advantage of all the nice new features, but trust the process to compile them into browser-friendly JavaScript, something that'll work in Internet Explorer and other older browsers. It also just isn't really feasible to do things the old way because React applications tend to be pretty large. We have hundreds, if not thousands, of JavaScript files. Those files have dependencies on each other. So believe it or not, it actually would be much, much more difficult to do things in the typical way when it comes to React. So I promise you, the trade-off of having this complicated build system is absolutely a good one, and it's something that we'll learn more about in this course.
Perfect. Perfect. So we'll learn more about build system in the tools and trade reference model. Many of the videos in this course have text summaries available. You can show this summary by clicking on the video summary. Oh, okay. Exactly. Mm. Build your own React. The new psychology of success.
Here are some ideas. So first, if you have a choice of something safe versus a challenge, take the challenge. If you hit an obstacle, try to interpret it in a growth mindset way. So what can I learn from this? What can I do next? As I mentioned before, if you see someone who's better than you, go learn from them. So those are
exactly what I'm doing.
of behaviors you can start doing, in addition to, as I also mentioned before, monitoring those fixed mindset triggers. And the thing is that it's a journey that one is always on. It's not ever the case that you've arrived at a full permanent growth mindset. It's something that you have to look at all the time. Because even I hear, so listen to that voice in your head at the trigger points. Because even I hear myself saying sometimes in my head, I was never good at that. Whoa, did I say that? So listen to that voice. It's constantly running in your head.
Okay. That was a while ago. However you like. No, this is actually to build this. What is the problem here? This is meant to be a challenging exercise. It's 100% okay if you can solve it. Spend 5 to 10 minutes on it and then watch it. Accepting criteria. The result pane should show the UI described by the React element. It should contain an anchor tag, which links to a Wikipedia and contain the text "read more on Wikipedia." So in other words, it should work with any type of elements, anchor and paragraph, as well as button. It should handle all HTML attribute and it should handle all HTML attributes ID and disable. The element should contain a text specific under children, and children will be a string. A text specific container children here. So because this is the render function, you're gonna take the element, create DOMs, and append them to the page. So if you're gonna take the DOM, and the container DOM element, So in this case, it's supposed to render this element, right? And in order to render that element, which is the render function that is being called here, you say, hey, I'm gonna take the container DOM element and then attach that to append child of the React element, right? Container DOM element is not the same. Append child, or you can say this append. Okay, it's doing now a coercion here. Okay, so see, because it's reading this as an object, and we want to append that element into the DOM. So how can I append elements? Append element NBN, because this is going to receive now is a parameter that must be a node, a set of node object or string to insert. Exactly. What if I want to now append, okay, is now an element. Exactly, because we need to wrap this as an element. We need to wrap this as an element. So since this is an element, and I want to now, you can say insert agent element. Yeah, we can say that. We can say insert insert adjacent text, or insert HTML, the position, or insert agent, position and the element. So in this case, we're supposed to insert that as an element. But we somehow need to convert that element into that. Exactly, it's because we need to somehow convert that and append that to that. We need to say is the append child, alright, of the React element, but it say that this container DOM element doesn't contain that. So what we can do is to because here what we want is to create our own, that one of the best way to learn how something works is to build our own simplified version of it. In this exercise, you will create a render function that takes the React elements and produce the equivalent DOM structure. To keep things simple as possible, we won't bother with the create root API discussed in the previous lesson. Instead, we will write a render function that takes two parameters, the React element describing the UI we want, okay, which is a function, okay, or in this case it's not a function, it's just an object in this case, and the target DOM node that will host our application. This means to be a challenging exercise. It is 100% okay if you can solve it. Spend the 5-10 minutes on it and then watch the video below. The result pane should show the UI described by the React element. In this case, this one. So because I cannot append this directly, because this container that I'm passing here is a container DOM element, but doesn't have that property here, append child. So and at the end of the day, I need to append all of the elements in the React here, all right? So what I can do is to create now an element, and by the time that I create that element, and by the time I create that element, all right, the return value will be now an element that I can append those elements there. So in other words, is that I can do something like this, is say, hey, append is of course give me now an object if we want us to now stringify what is this, okay, in other words, say something like this, to inspect what are we getting. We're getting now this. So based on this data, which is an object that we are getting to, what I want to do is this. I want to now is find a way to create that element with this information, which is what I want to do. Okay, I want to create that element with this information. All right. So I want to create now the element. So we're going to say create element. All right. But this element, create element, document.create element, exactly. So document.create element. All right. And I want to get that data from the React element that I can say render empty. All right. So then I can say, hey, I want to now get the type of this React element type. Okay. Once I get that element, then I want to render. Okay, and I can say is the element here. Once I get that element, then I can say, hey, the element dot text content will be is the React element, the children data, right? Okay. The children data, which is the React element children data, so it's children, okay, and also any attribute that this element has, all right, or any props that this element has, okay. So in other words, I need to go over this property keys, this record, and now attach all of them to this element, but as an attribute. Okay. So how can I do that? How can I attach is the, let me see, how can I attach this? How can I attach properties or set properties? You know? Or set attribute here is this one. So I need to set the attributes of this and the name of the value. So because I'm going to iterate through this record, where what I can say is let's go to iterate through this collection here for of say cons say props, right, of or in, because this is an object of the React element dot props. All right, and what I want to do is to say, well, I want to in the element set attribute property, set attribute. I want to match each one of them with the key and the value, which is in our case we can do this structuring here, and say the key and the value and do that, right? Key and the value. And therefore we're gonna get this as expected. As it is. And then now we can render our element here, which is element. And there you got it. Holy fuck. Holy fuck. But exactly, I got an information here that I want to translate into something. And I want to do that step by step. And I want to do that step by step. Key in this, you can do this, or directly do something like this, you know. You can destructure all of this. You know, create a DOM, which is exactly what we did here. So we create the DOM, then we update the content. All right, then we update the content, okay, and update or add the attribute, okay. So add the content and add the attributes, and then render it, and then attach to, then attach the element to the DOM. This is silly, mind-blowing, and yet something powerful there. Add the content, add the attributes, and there you got it. Holy moly. So we create our first render function. I'm gonna receive these elements properties, this object that is describing what it needs to be done, and then I'm going to create an element, create the element, update the attributes, and then append that to the DOM. Holy fuck. Oh shit. Holy French toast. Let's explore this a bit.
So you've been tasked with building your own React, which is no small feat. And you haven't been given that much to go on, right? We have this React element, which is a JavaScript object that describes a hypothetical anchor tag that links to the Wikipedia homepage and has the text "read more on Wikipedia." And we have to write a function that takes that element and a place to put it and turns it into reality, right? Realizes this DOM element. And I think in a task like this, it's helpful to enumerate the steps that we need to take. And so first I know that I need to create a DOM element, right? The actual anchor tag. Then I need to update it with all of the different properties, right? In this case, we have the href over here and the text inside. And then finally, we have to put it in the container. We have to actually take this element we've created and append it to this container so that it shows up in the DOM. So for step one, I'm going to create a new variable, DOM element, and it's going to be equal to document.create from this object. I'm going to say React element.type element.innerText object and set it.
I use now the text content rather than this, okay?
To the href property. That does work, but again, I want this function to handle any React element and other React data attribute. Like we could say data number, do this. We could use object.end. Well, I want to get the corresponding value, so I'm going to say const value, but let's double check. It has the data attribute. It has all of the attributes that we've set because I'm demystify something that probably seems very magical, right? We think that React does all of this complex, archaic stuff for us, and it does, right? Like there's stuff we haven't talked about here in terms of how React reacts to the things that change in our application. That's a big part of what makes React so special. But fundamentally, at the end of the day, React takes these object descriptions of DOM elements and it produces the real thing. If you've heard the term virtual DOM, it's not used so much anymore, but for a long time this was how they described how React works. because essentially you wind up with these JavaScript objects that describe a whole bunch of DOM, and React DOM takes those descriptions and mirrors them into the real DOM, which produces like links that you can click on and forms that you can submit and all of that. Fundamentally,
and again, this is a technique that is being used to now mirror that, or to say, hey, I have now a virtual representation of the UI on the objects, and whenever now those objects change, which is something that I keep track of based on based on when the user update the state or not, now I can is update that specific elements into the DOM.
Well, React DOM is this sort of translator that it takes the descriptions we produce in JavaScript and produces and realizes the real version of them. And it does so using all the same methods we're talking about here, like document.createElement and setAttribute and appendChild. As things change in the DOM, React will use whichever method is most appropriate to convey those changes. And this is really like the core thing of React that a bunch of people don't understand. It's a JavaScript framework, and it exists in JavaScript. And for all of the like smoke and mirrors and all of the advanced stuff that it does, fundamentally it uses the exact same methods you would use if you were doing the same thing in JavaScript.
Exactly here. So build your own React here. Exactly, but the TLDR is that what is the expected output? I want to, so what is the goal of this? I want to now, this informations to be now show on the DOM. And once you know the goal, you say, okay, so let me now factorize that. How can I split that? How can I break down into that multiple parts? Is this one, is this one, is this one, is this one? And once you compose the entire thing, then you have what you expect. And I think that's pretty mind-bending because you can also apply to your life, bro. Oh, and let me do that, my friend. And let me do that, my friend. So that'll be all for this video. It was, by the way, a mind-blowing experiment to build my own React here. Okay, so build your own React. All right. So build your own React, which is this. And also how you can bind that to this. And then you now is provide the solution. So the solution. So this is the problem. And then now the solution. Exactly. And it should work. Exactly. Holy moly, bro. Exactly. In academic circles, this is known as productive failure. DIU productive failures, boosting performance in large undergraduate biology course. Boosting performance in large undergraduate biology courses. So there are several scientific papers. Holy fuck. In productive failure, the conventional instructors process is reversed so that the learner attempts to solve the challenging problems ahead of receiving explicit instructions. While student often fails to produce satisfactory solutions, hence failures, these attempts help learning encode key features and learn better from subsequent instruction. For mechanical stuff, yes. For mechanical stuff, yes. But in life, that's another stuff. That's another thing. Can you? Jesus, enough, bro. Okay. Productive failure. And I really love about this because he's telling me is that how now in the academics they're actually trying to learn things by failing. You have to be careful of what failing it means, especially for mechanical stuff that needs to be instructed and so on and so forth. So, uh, so yeah. If you struggle with a problem, give up, and then watch the solution video. You're much likely to fully understand and remember things. This is how we build lasting, generalized skills. Of course, it can be demoralizing to struggle. It can trigger our imposter syndrome, make us doubt ourselves, but this is the wrong interpretation. All it means is that we are being challenged, and when we are being challenged, you are now is or say what you're gonna do, how you're gonna do, and therefore like that. Mm-hmm. Okay. This mindset is a superpower for developers. Personally, I had a huge impact in my own development in my career. It won't be all struggle, but it's that the mindset of the new psychology of success. This code is for you. Remember taking exam in high school. Teachers will circulate between the desks, looming above us, making sure we weren't trying to cheat. This course is not like that. It's not an authoritarian taskmaster. This course, this is your course, and you should use however you like it here. But again, there are other stuff that they mention here as it is. Other scientific papers, as they like to call here. Why? Because I'm telling you only to. Anyway. The new psychology of Jesus, the new psychology, bro. Oh my god. The new psychology, man. That's laughable. Anyway, that'll be all for this video. Take care. Bye bye. Jesus, French toast.